many times am I going to get cut off? I keep thinking I have enough space. Anyways, I forget where I was, but yeah, so I became a Mariners fan because it left a deep imprint, being in that heyday in Seattle, going to those games. I can also say, as much as I love Jordan, I became a Sonics fan because of living in Seattle and having certain experiences at that age. And then I kind of just, sports, again, fell away from me for a long time. It's professional sports. Now I've been thinking about this love of the Warriors, and that's my team. I'm a Dubs fan. How deep does it run for me? And I'm going to sound very fair weather here, in spite of everything I've said, in spite of the actual commitment I have and love I have for watching the Warriors. When Curry's gone, perish the thought. May this man find the fountain of rejuvenation and of youth and never leave the game. I know that's not how it works, but here in a couple years, knock on wood, and be healthy the next couple years, but who knows? But at some point, Curry's gone from the Warriors. Am I going to continue to be a Warriors fan? Even as my love for the Warriors and for the game and for has broadened out beyond Curry, I don't think I would continue. Here's what I'm hoping. Here's my ideal scenario. The league keeps talking about expanding to include two new teams. I think we're at 30 teams, so they probably want to balance it out, have an even number, right? So even in the East, even in the West, 16 and 16, if they expanded 32 teams, 2 new teams. And the Seattle Supersonics, or a team in Seattle, is kind of one of those, that's part of the conversation, and seems like kind of an obvious direction to move in. And there are, to this day, many diehard Sonics fans. And I can't imagine if Seattle did get a team, and it makes sense because it's a big metropolis, there's a lot of money there, or basically an already built-in fan base who hated the fact that the Sonics left to begin with, would be delighted to have a team come back. I can't imagine that it would be anything other than the Sonics, right? If it came back to Seattle, that Seattle would get a team and it not be the Sonics. That just, it seems like pandemonium would break out in the fandom across the city. It just, and there's former players. I saw something with Sean Kemp and Gary Payton recently talking about, their love and influence behind the scenes. It seems like there's just a lot of forces that I can't imagine it would be anything but the Sonics. So my ideal would be, as this sunset of Curry, it pains me to even use those terms, but Curry going out of the frame, hopefully will be coincident with the Sonics coming back onto the scene. Wouldn't that be great? And I would be, and I know how fair weather this sounds, but the Sonics would be my team. I can't imagine me staying with the Warriors in the absence of Steph Curry, especially because Clay's gone and all these other things. But that's different for me if I just, by way of contrast, the NFL. 49ers were my team when I moved to Seattle, and you would think, why would that be different? In the same way that I, became a Sonics fan, the same way I became a Mariners fan, why not become a Seahawks fan? Well, part of that maybe is just kind of the harsh truth that the Seahawks sucked back then, I think. I can't really remember much about the Seahawks team. I went to a game, which was amazing, but I don't think they were that good of a team back then. I could be wrong. But whatever the reason, that loyalty for me to the 49ers has been unshakable throughout the years. And, I can say getting back into the NBA, that recovery for me led to me getting back into the NFL. I had little glimpses of, maybe watching a Super Bowl here or there because it's such a national holiday in the States. But I've gotten back into, mostly back into the 49ers, to be honest. It's not like and the NBA is something I'm more connected to, but I still feel pretty passionately about, watching the 49ers, and it's been fun watching Brock Purdy, and it's another amazing team. I mean, Kittle, Purdy, McCaffrey, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, and some of these young guys, Ricky Pearsall. Who else am I missing in here? Tonjes. I mean, yeah, so it's been a fun team to watch, and we had a great season. But I guess it's fun for me just to kind of talk sports. It's part of why I'm doing this. But the broader point here, if there is one, is just granting yourself that permission to. Because I guess for a long time, especially in this kind of intellectual whatever phase that I went through in the college undergraduate years, and kind of extending beyond that, the identity that had formed around that, being just kind of unabashedly into sports, I don't want to say it would have been embarrassing or shameful or something, but uncool, or it just wasn't resonant somehow. It didn't jive with the person I wanted to project and the things that I wanted to be involved in. And that's kind of a shame that I missed out on a lot of that. But and then, getting very deep into spirituality. It seems very unspiritual, right? Very mundane, very in the world, very I don't know, just coarse or something. I don't know. I can't think of the right way to express it right now. But again, somehow it doesn't seem very spiritual, right? To be a sports fiend, wild about sports. But the fact is, God, there's so many layers to our being. And it just feels more authentic. There's something that I enjoy, In a way, this is kind of, I hesitate to say this because this is not exactly right, but it's like when you're younger and there's certain bands that are cool and there's certain other bands that you like but are not cool, and so you don't like them, You definitely don't tell anybody. There's some flavor of that. I think it has to do with identity and things like that, but not. The reason that's not the best example, because it's not like sports are uncool or something like that. It's just relative to, one's identity and who we think we are, all these things. Anyways, I said this in the other video. Ram Dass, he talks about, in some of his talks, he talks about well, I don't know if I want to bring that in. I guess it's just giving yourself permission to be who you are, as trite as that sounds. And it may not be sports for you, but just giving yourself permission to be kind of silly and funny and human, and that there's something profound about that. It's loving towards yourself, and there's something natural about it, I've been loving also, just, it gives you a way to connect with people too. in a way that feels kind of not like this huge commitment. It doesn't have to be super deep, but in a way that's just kind of fun, and you have something to say. You have some common ground with people you might not have common ground with otherwise through sports. And at the place that I work, I've found other 49ers fans, and or just it's fun because it's like sports is like legalized tribalism. It's like this kind of safe avenue for us to be very tribal and very kind of silly and unspiritual, or just kind of tribal, I guess is the word that's coming up for me. In group, out group, but in a way that there's a background smile there. It's like we love sports, and you can take sports very seriously, and you can take them too seriously too. But for most people, it's like we've got this tribal affiliation, this in-group identity. But there's enough sense of the common love of sport there that you can communicate across party lines, right? You can communicate. You can just talk shop. You can talk sports with me, to be concrete, me as a Niners fan, talking to a Raiders fan, talking to a Pats fan or a Packers fan, and you can kind of compliment each other's teams, or you can give each other shit. We've got, where I live, there's not a lot of Seahawks fans, but because they're going to the Super Bowl, and you see more and more, you see some people coming into the store where I work, wearing their Seahawks garb, and I've been going up to them real deadpan and saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. It looks like they didn't let you know when you came in, but we're actually no longer serving Seahawks fans here in the store." And so I'll give people shit that way, and it's fun. It's just, there's a lighthearted, kind of playful thing about it that's just really comforting to connect with people that way. And you can commiserate, over your wounds, the trauma, the loss, for my Niners this year losing, and got some guys that I know are Niners fans that work there, and or just customers coming. Anyways, it's fun. It's a fun thing to talk about that we can all kind of invest in a and so it seems kind of trivial in a certain sense, or superficial, I guess, in one sense. And that's not totally wrong. I mean, it's good to have a sense of proportion and perspective with all these things, but there's a lot of good stuff that's wrapped up in it for me. Feels very healthy. Just being human, right? Giving yourself permission to be human. I guess that was the Ram Dass point I was going to make. He said, for the longest time, I thought what people appreciated about coming to my talks and what I offered was the transcendent, talking about God, talking about the transcendent, experientially, exploring, these different meditative avenues and the divine. But and then Ram Dass goes on to say, but what I came to realize, and what I kept hearing feedback from people, and letters that I was getting, and conversations I'd have after talks, where people would come up to me and they'd express, "Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your humanity, and that, and how human you are. It's just so nourishing and helpful on the path." And he said that he kind of recoiled. Maybe I'm adding this in, but I think he said something like he kind of recoiled at that notion, because his humanity is what he was trying to get away from. I'm trying to meditate my way into God's grace, and there's a period where that coming out of the world and focusing on God and divinity is very important, because we're so lost in the mundane, we're so lost in distractions, we're so lost in trivia, we're so lost in what's that word? Trivial Pursuit. That's a game, right? we're so lost in these kind of big picture inconsequential things that it's important to have, for some of us, a real deep dive in that direction to reestablish a sense of order and of priority and of order, that God is the highest, that supreme virtue, that supreme value, transcendent grace, that's transcendence. But part of this whole thing is the fact that here we are in this reality with a national identity, with a species level identity, with a, and on down. If you're in the States, you've got a state level identity, as crazy as that sounds. Some people very identified with their city. So we've got all these different dimensions to our being. Psychological identity, biographical identity, and then all these preferences and different passions and different ways we express, our existence. And so it's funny at some point in the path that it becomes more about being human. Now, I don't want to make any absolute statements here because it's really recognizing the non-separation of all these things. The way I see it, there's the Heart Sutra that states something like, form is none other than emptiness, emptiness none other than form. The transcendent is none other than the relative none other than the transcendent. And yes, there's some wisdom there. God is immanent and transcendent. I sort of see it in a slightly different way, more like there's layers of creation, and the more subtle layers are the less formal, the layers with less form, the more they become more formless, the more subtle you get into just pure beingness, God's being. And so it's like there's a crystallization process, an individuation process, a modulation process, to use Rupert Spira's language, out of the depths of infinite grace. That spirit, you could say, crystallizes, concretizes, individuates into the diversity and multiplicity of forms. More Rupert Spira language. He has a good way of expressing it. And so, but there's no, it's a gradient, and there's no real, it's never, every level is none other than infinite grace, infinite being. It's just a different density, you could say, a different rate of vibration or something like that. And there's a way in which that Heart Sutta kind of creates this dichotomy, transcendent, immanent, but I see it just as this one. It's more like a spectrum rather than two poles. Anyways, we don't have to get into all that, but yeah, there's a joy in having a healthy contact with one's humanity, and the path, walked in a way, in a healthy, good way. It just sort of clarifies your humanity. It's like, for some reason, I'm thinking of ghee as clarified butter. It's something like that. More and more light pours through your humanity, so there's more and more health, more and more God-centered you are, more and more aligned you are, the more and more these healthy aspects of your being can come online and express themselves in a way that is not addictive, is not distorted, in a way that just feels wholesome. And so I'm sharing the specifics for me of what that looks like, and using sports as one example or avenue. How that's showing up for me. But it's not unspiritual. No, it's part of who I am. I guess that's kind of the message. And the caveat there, you want to be careful too, because it's like there's always a shadow potential. There's always an imbalance potential. Because again, you can get so lost in the world and so lost in the merely mundane that you're cut off from the transcendent, and then your humanity can become very distorted, and the way you express it can become very distorted, and so you need both things here. And fundamentally, yeah, I mean, God is the highest, but so anyways, Warriors lost last night. It was pretty bad. It was a beatdown. It was a beatdown. It's frustrating to watch, but even on a hard day, like I've been going through some hard times, there's still just a joy in the rhythm of tuning into the game and watching the game. And there's something I love about it. It's brutal watching the Niners go down in the playoffs. Especially, it seemed like we were having this Cinderella season where we just kept defying the odds. It's still fun. There's still something fun about tuning in, and then all the kind of peripheral things of getting to, tease people, give people a hard time, getting to connect with people about sports, So yeah, I'm grateful to have that in my life. Take care.